Welcome to the CRREA Project's training videos on regulatory advocacy for legal services attorneys. This video series is produced by the Consumer Rights Regulatory Engagement and Advocacy Project, CRREA Project. This training was originally provided to legal services attorneys in partnership with the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, Legal Impact Network, and Racial Justice Institute Network. To find print materials of the visuals presented in this training, visit our website at www.creaproject.org. In this video, Diane Thompson presents on CRREA Project's Quick Guide to Regulatory Advocacy.
So this is the CRREA Project's Quick Guide to Regulatory Advocacy. And I love this document. A law student, Sarah Brandon, working with us, did most of the work to design it. What I love about this document is it puts in front of you in one place the whole overview of how to do regulatory advocacy and how to take a strategic process, a strategic view of regulatory advocacy, and map from your work, from where you are in the timeline, and where you are in your goals, what your goals are, to what the tools are that you want to do, and how to map your tools to your goals to where you are in the time frame. The baseline here at the very top are the three main factors for any strategy approach that we believe you should always be thinking about in your approach to regulatory advocacy. You always want to share facts. This is a place where regulatory advocacy is very different from either legislative advocacy or judicial advocacy. It's really important. It's always important to share facts, but being factual, being grounded in data, being grounded in empirical information is critical to your persuasive effect. And it's far more necessary to have at least the trappings of an empirical grounding, and we'll talk more about this, in regulatory advocacy than it is in legislative advocacy. If you're showing up in front of a legislator, you can you can show up with 50 constituents who are all angry and are telling heartrending stories, and that will probably do the trick. That doesn't do the trick nearly as well in regulatory advocacy. And similarly, if you're in front of a judge or a jury telling the story about how your client was harmed, is very persuasive. And that's usually sufficient, right? Or it'll take you most of the way. As we'll talk about, stories are important in regulatory advocacy, but they're not sufficient. You want to start with a story. It's a good hook, but you want to ground the stories that you have in context. You always want to tie into the agency's statutory mandate. Agencies only have whatever authority is delegated to them by Congress when we're talking about federal advocacy. And so they have to align the rule with what they have been told by Congress to do. And the last point that we think is a sort of a foundational strategic point is you want to always ask questions. You want to ask the agency staff what they need to move forward in a way that serves your community. You want to come at them from a position of respect and inquiry. So the timeline, and MB and Seema will be walking us through an example of this. We often think about the timeline. So the timeline starts before the rule, before you get to notice and comment rulemaking. And one of our strong suggestions, one of the things that we think you should be thinking about, is how to help set the agenda, how to engage before there's a rule on the table. And that's the point where you have the most flexibility to engage and how you engage with the agency. And if you can set the agenda, we can be proactive, and we can shape what the ultimate rule is in ways that benefit our clients, as opposed to if we wait to engage at the notice of proposed rulemaking stage when we're stuck in a much more reactive position and the agency's hands are tied. There's still some work at the final rule stage in terms of implementation, and then the implementation can loop you back into the pre-rule stage. Then you want to think about what your goals are. And so again, we want to really help shift all of us to thinking about how do we influence the agenda. And then, do you want to speed up the rulemaking? Do you want to build the record? Do you want to strengthen the rule? Do you want to delay it? Do you want to oppose it? And then when you get to the final rule stage implementation, overturn the rule. And then you want to match your tools to the goals. And so the tools can be a meeting with the head of the agency or with staff. And you want to think about, do you want to meet with, or is it better to meet with the head of the agency or with the staff? And that can be different for different people. You can send letters. You can ask for public hearings. You can go to public hearings. You can comment, which again, we'll have a whole session just about commenting because it is so key to regulatory advocacy. You can think about how to link your regulatory advocacy strategy with a media campaign. This was done again very effectively in the public charge work that I know many of you are familiar with. But thinking about visibility in the media, visibility with congressional oversight, that's not as powerful directly as it is in legislative advocacy, but it does help you build the overall record and can help build pressure on the agency to move in one direction or another. And then, when you get to implementation, you're again, like the final rule stage, you can either raise directly, you can file complaints with the agency about if there's non-compliance with the rule. And certainly if it's a bad rule, you can think about litigation. And you can also think, and now we're again in that window for rules that the Trump administration got over the hurdle after, I think it's August, but now I'm blanking on the date. I think it's the end of August. So for any rule that was adopted by the Trump administration from the end of August through when the Biden administration took control, all of those rules are now subject to being overturned by Congress by use of the CRA, the Congressional Review Act. And that's a very powerful tool, and it's worth thinking about, are there regulations that the Trump administration adopted in the last 5 months, that are worth bringing to Congress's attention. Okay. So I think with that, we are now probably ready. So I think with that, we're ready. Well, okay, yes, I will go back and just say one other thing. So this really is a place one other thing just to say, this document that you're looking at on the screen, this quick guide to regulatory advocacy, it is on our CRREAproject.org website. There are hyperlinks embedded throughout that take you to documents that explain what do we mean by the terms, how do you do this, how do you comment, how do you find out what the regulatory plan is. So I think this is a useful document to start with and think about where am I, what do I want to do, and then you can use it also as a point of entry to go deeper into figuring out what kind of support you need and how to think about these various tools depending on where you are.
Thanks for watching. Visit our website at www.CRREAproject.org for additional materials on how to do effective regulatory advocacy. We'll walk you through basics like how to write an effective comment letter, and some more advanced topics like how to plan your advocacy strategies using the unified agenda and how to think about agency guidance documents. Get in touch with us at www.CRREAproject.org to provide feedback and let us know what other materials would be useful to you in your advocacy.